Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video I will be creating a form with validation in React.js. So I already did some preparation to save time. I created a new project from a template. If you don't know how to do it, here you can see React.js official website and documentation, and you just need to run these commands, like first command to create app, and go to this directory and just start your application. I already did this, and I remove everything from the app.js file. I put there just form example as a title, and my application is running and it looks just like that. And here I also created already some files and folders. So we'll have form folder with 4 files there: form.js file and form CSS for styling, form element JS file and form element CSS for styling. And also, since I will be doing validation, I created validation JS file, and I put there some validation logic. And that's it basically. Also, to save time, I already put some basic styles into form and form element CSS. So in form we just style for form overall, for button, and for button disabled. If you want, you can pause it and examine it more. And for form element CSS, this styling for some element that we'll be creating: input, text area, and select with options. So also you can pause here the first part, and here a little validation for invalid inputs and text area. So that's it, and now we can start. So we'll be creating form element component first, where I will have different elements: input element, text area element, and select element, depending on the some props that are passed from the form. So we'll start import React from React, and I will be using functional components. So let's create our component. We'll call it form element, and it will accept some props and will return something depending on the props. So we'll expect the props to specify what kind of element we want. So here I return just div element to wrap some element itself. We'll have here a label, which I'll get from the props. Then I will have here the element itself. I will save it in some variable, they called element, and then I will have here as the area where I will display the error. So for now, I will need to have some logic here whether to display it or not based on the state. So, but it will be right now I will just create a paragraph with this error where I get it from the error text I will get from the props. So this is the base, and now I need to create my element. So I will be creating based on the props as I said. So if props element equal input, I will be creating input element. So, and I will be expecting here to have some ID that also comes from props. Type also from props. Value can do placeholder. Otherwise, otherwise, if props element is select element, then I will be creating select element. So for select element, I will be getting ID from props, and I will be getting, oh, for now let's leave it like this because I want also add later some logic for the change attribute also. So, but for now let's leave just ID, and here let's display options. So in the props I will be expecting to get options, array of options, and I will be use a map function on them to loop through all of them. So for each option I will be creating option tag, and here I will be displaying option, let's say display, and on option itself I will have key, which I'll get from option value, let's do it, and value itself, which will be the same option value. You can copy. So this was for select. So I first checking if it's input, I'm creating input. If it's select, I'm creating select. If it's not select, something else, then we will be creating text area. For text area, I'll get ID, value, placeholder. So let's copy from input. So type we don't need here. So this is base, so this element will go here. Now let's add some class names I created. This will be element. It's from here, just element. On the label, also put class name, label, and I think on the that's it. And let's export this component form element. So now we can use this form element. Also we need import styles. So import form element CSS. Okay, so now we can use this form element in form. So we'll create form component now. Again, import React. Create form. Here I don't we won't have any props, so don't need pass any props. And let's export it. And let's import styles, form CSS. So here I want to create just 3 different form elements. It will be one for each that we have: input, text area, and select. So let's return form, and here we will have, let's import our form element we just created. And here we'll be creating form element, like 3 different form elements. So the first one, let's do ID. It just form, or like just like, let's imagine like form. There will be name, description, and say favorite color with drop down, a couple colors for choice. So here will be name, ID, label will be name. What else we need? Specify what element is it. This will be input. Next type here for input we need text. We need error text here also. Let's enter valid name. Okay, let's just make it easier. We'll copy this form, creating description. Sorry. Description. Label description. So enter valid description. This element is text area, and we don't need type here. So, and one more. Oops. Let's copy one more time for creating. Will be color label color. This element will be select element, error text, and here we need provide options. For options, it will be array of options. So array of objects. So first one will be just empty, value empty, and display will be empty. And now let's copy this and create two more options. The first one will be just empty, and other one will be value will be red and display red, but with capital. Let's do label your favorite color, red and blue. Okay, let's see if we yeah. Okay, now we need to go to our app.js and actually import our form. From here we need go okay, no, don't need go just one level, forms and form, and here underneath title put form, and let's see. Okay, we have something, but now let's go back to form and put their class name. It will be form. It's from form CSS, but I already created earlier. And then on submit we need create some handler what we will be doing. So let's call it submit handler, and let's create this submit handler. So like in reality, of course, you will be submitting probably for some database or something, but here, since we don't have any backend, I will be just console log all my data. So, but now I will be passing event here, all data from the form, and I need to avoid page reload. I need to prevent default on the form. And then I will have the console log. I want to later display here name, description, and color. Right now I'm not saving all this data I'm entering into form anywhere. Later we will add this state handler and we'll put here some values, but for now let's do just like this. And now we need to create submit button on the form. So let's create button, let's call it submit, and our button will need class name, button, and type submit. Let's see what we have. So now we have this form. We'll need to hide this values. We'll add some validation, but for now it looks just like this. Okay, so now let's create our validation. So here I will add just two types of validation. It can be expanded for needs, but for now we'll create two types of validation. So let's say validation type required, and so we'll be validating required values and say let's validate length. So we will export constant for validation required, that it will return this type. So don't need here any parameters. So we'll return here type for validation type required. So let's do the same for lengths. But here we would need parameters. We will be validating length mean value and max value we will need. And then we will have validation function, validate function. we will be getting a value we want to validate and all validators we want to apply. So let is valid, let be true, and then we will go through all validators of validators and check every. So if validator type will be that it's required, then we will be checking, will be setting is valid to will be getting like previous value and checking also combining it with the value is current value, basically checking its length, right? Should be more than 0. So basically we pass here a value, so we checking that it's more than 0. Basically it's not empty, so this will satisfy that it's required. And if they both are true, is valid. And do the same for our other type. Here we just need to check length should be bigger than mean value, which we will be getting in this validator, and less than max, less or equal than max value. So, and then we'll check, we will return is valid. So now we can use this validator in our form element. So let's import it. Validate from, actually we need to go up. So here we will need to add some state, like manage state for our elements. So for that I will be using hook, use reducer hook. So we need to import it. And I will be creating constant form element reducer, which will get this state, current state and action. And it will, based on the action type, switch and return and modify state accordingly. So action type, and say if it's case, will be case change. So if there is some change on our, say, on one of our elements, like input, select, whatever, we have change, then we want to change our state accordingly. So first we use spread operator and apply the current state, and then apply changes. So we'll change value. So basically what we need to manage on our elements, it's value and is valid. So it's what we will specify on the state, value and is valid. So in action we will pass these two values. Value and is valid. So and modify the state based on this. So, and in other default case, we will just throw an exception. Not exception, like throw error, say. So now we can use this use reducer to specify how we will deal with the state, basically. So use reducer, and we need to pass it the reducer, which we'll just create it, form element reducer, and the next parameter is their initial state. We'll pass initial state. So initially we have value empty, we have is valid false. So and this reducer will return will basically, how to say, will return the state and will return dispatch action that you can trigger the state change. So it's like similar to use state hook. So here we'll create constant and element state and dispatch. So now we can element state. So now first we can, depending on the if it's valid, to display errors or not. So we basically will need to modify this class, because initially it will be just elements. The class name will be element, but if it's not valid, then we want to expand this class name and have invalid in it also. So for that we will add here if not element state is valid, then we will display add to the class name invalid. So also on this paragraph, like we not always display paragraph, but only with arrow, but only if this condition is true. So we'll wrap it with the condition. So basically, if it's not valid, actually we don't need this. So if it's not valid, then let's display paragraph with arrow. So now we need to trigger this action change state when the input changes. For that we will add term on change prop. So on change will be calling, will be trigger and change. So we'll add here element change handler. And we'll have this on all our elements, on select as well as on text area. So, and we'll create this handler. So, how to call it? Element change handler. So on the change we will get event, and we want to dispatch, and so we're using this dispatch that we have on use reducer, and we setting type, which will be this dispatch will trigger these actions here on the switch. So type here we want to change, so specify here type change. Also we need pass here value, and we need pass their validators. So actually here instead we not just getting action, but we doing validation here actually. So we will be here passing action value and validators. So we'll determine if it's valid based on the value and what validators we have on this particular element. So here we need pass validators from the props. So now we don't have these validators yet set up as props. Then we go back to forms and we set here on these form elements additional prop, which will be validators. So let's add this Let's do it here, for example. So validators will be array of validators from this. Have here two validator required validation links, so we need to export them to our form. Import. Let's copy. We'll import this one and import this one, validation links. So from apps validation. So now we can pass it here. Let's do on the select also we'll do the same, and on the description we will do length. And for length, remember that we need to pass here min and max values. So let's do 1 and 100, for example. So now we pass in validators as parameters, and here we can pass it to dispatch and trigger state change based on the values. So let's see what else. Yeah, see, now it's like invalid. Get some error. Let's see. Value trim, complaining something. So maybe I'm not passing values somewhere. So form element. Yeah. Of course, need to. I forgot to pass value here. So value from event target value. Let's see now. Okay. Works now. Description doesn't. Okay. Let's see what the description one. Validation. Oh, here I forgot to add now it works. Okay, this was for validation, and now let's get rid of this that it's invalid. Let's do only get rid of these errors, and will display only once we touch the area. So for that we will add to our state is touched property, which will be false, and here if it's not valid and element is touched, we will display error. And the same here. And we need to add another property to our input, and others actually on blur, which is like when we will allow us to, once we touched and then we navigate away, it will trigger some state change. So call it element touch handler. And edit here and create new function for element touch handler. Here we don't need anything here, and we will dispatch some other type for our state change. So here we need to add another case. Oops. Which will be touch case. And here we'll return the state, and we will change is touched. This state property is touched to true. So now by default it's and when we navigate away, it's we get this validation error, so it looks better like this. And so now we get validation, and now we can work with the overall form validation, as well as like saving our form data in the overall state, that we can later here on submit use these values on the forms. For that we need also create state management here with form reducer. So I can copy this to form component. So need here use reducer, and here it will be form reducer. Also we'll get state action. I will have just change here, and we'll like do some state changes here. But let's first to create our state. initial state, that it will be easy to understand what we are really changing. So you can can just start copy from here, and here we will use form reducer. It will be form state and we'll have is valid for form, for whole form is valid, and then we will be managing each element separately. So we'll have elements, we'll have 3 elements: name element, and it will have also value, which initially empty, and this name element, which is like first hour, also will have is valid on it, which will is false. So, and then we will have another element for description and another for color. Description and color, and it will be the same: initially value empty and they not valid, false. So now we can here do this sum. If we have the change of one element, we will dispatch and action change, and here we will be calculating the state for the whole form. So let's do initially is form valid will be false, and then we need to go through our elements on the form on the state, basically form state, which is we have here in current state. So we'll go for each element in state elements and evaluate if it's, say, if it's current element that trigger change, then we will compare we will make the form valid based on this value of this particular element. So we do if this element matches the action ID, we will pass this to dispatch this ID. Then we do is form valid based on if it's already valid and the value of this action is valid. But if it's like, we will also, if it's not the element that was changed but it's some other element, then we will be validating based on what we have it's in the state. So we will get state all elements. We will find this particular element that we right now on and see what state it has. So this is how we will calculate the whole form that is valid, and then we will be returning it. First of all, we need to spread all our state to make sure that we base on the state what is it, and then for elements we need to make changes if it any. So we will do spread this current elements state and then apply changes. So for this particular action ID that it was requested here, it will be, is it name, description or color, it depends. So we'll do set new value from the action, and we will say is valid based on the action value is valid, and the overall form is valid will be based on that we just calculated is form valid. So, and now we need to dispatch this action based on the change. So for that we need to, let me think, we'll need to have some on element change handler that we will be triggering. So say this element changed, then we want to trigger the change. So let's do add here one element change. We will be triggering an element change handler that will dispatch some action, and it will be on each form element. So if something changed, then we will be triggering we'll be creating function here. We pass here, we would need here to pass from this element some data, like ID value is valid. So ID value is valid, and based on this we will dispatch. So dispatch type change, this one. So ID value is valid. Value is valid is valid. So now we need specify this, have this on element change prop, which will trigger on element change handler. So we need use this prop in form element to pass all this data we need here. So in form element, we need to create use effect hook that once, like, say ID value or is valid of this of particular element is changes, that we trigger in this using this prop on element change. So let's go back to form element, and here let's get this into variables on element change. Oops. Change, and also we'll get ID from props. That we can use effect. So use effect which will trigger something once certain values are changes. So here we'll have an array what we look in, what is changes. So actually, so these two, if it changes, but also we need look for value and is valid, because it means that our element was changed, and we want to trigger this on element change on our form, that we do validation on the form and as well as we update value. So if something of this changes, we do an element change and pass in its ID, value, and is valid. The only thing now, we don't have value in is valid, so we can get it from the state. From element state. So is valid. Okay, we have here, if something of this is changes, so in the state we have value and is valid, it changed, so we'll be triggering on element change on the form, that we update in the values and the form itself. And we have this on element change, we get in from the props here, that will specify, we get in as a prop, and here on this prop we actually call in on element change handler. So it will get all these values from the form element. The only one thing we need to do here in the form to avoid some infinite loop, because this will be recreated each time the form component is updated, I think. So we need to make sure that it's just once created, because it will be here will be recreated each time. So it will change each time. And then here, since we're looking at it here as dependency, it will trigger use effect to change this, and it will be infinited loop. So for that we can use callback hook. We wrap this into this use hook. We can specify some dependencies like this, when to update it. So we specify empty array, so it will be like will be created once. So okay, and now we have this form state, and we can use it to disable our button if it's, say, if it's not valid, then we don't want to that our button is enabled, so we will disable it. So it disabled if not form state is valid. So we have it disabled, so we put their name, we put their description, select. Okay. Let's see what we missed. Disabled if it's not valid. So now we set it false initially here. Then on the change we pass in ID value and is valid. We dispatch change. Getting ID value is valid. So we trigger change action. Actually we need to set it to true initially. Form here. So let's see. Let's see what else, because now it's enabled just based on the one value, but it shouldn't be because others are not valid yet. So initially it's true. We go through each element. If it's element action ID, we do based on validate of this action, well, if it's particular action valid. Oh, it should be else here. Okay. So disabled, and we put some name. We put some description. Select, and now it's enabled. And then we want, so we have here updating value based on this value. So our state is supposed to hold the values. So we can output the values for each element we have right now. So let's try to get it from form state. So elements, and this will be name, value, and let's do it for others also. So description and color. Save it. Back, we have console open. So let's do name, description, blue. So on submit, so Not sure you can. Oh no, I can make it bigger. Oh, too big. So we have here name, what we enter, description blue. Once it's not valid, we I think I didn't add it on blur to select if it will work. Probably also here. See. Yeah. So now I think that's it, and we have the form, validation, and submission of the form. So thanks for watching, and see you in my next video.